Anytime you want.
12 to 4 or 1 to 5? 12 to 4.
Ready? Yes. Good evening. I'd like to start the Strategic Planning Committee special meeting Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. Call to order. Number 2 on the agenda, public comments related to agenda items. Anyone online that would like to talk or have some comment? Okay. Anyone in the gallery that would like to have? No? Okay. Thank you, Judy. We do not have a quorum right now, so we are going to move by the approval of the minutes until I think we're going to have, I think a couple people are late. So we will start our report for the Wells Management Study update. We have water supply, laboratory services, and patrol. And Scott is late, so maybe we can keep it to 2 hours. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Tom Tyre. I'm the Director of Facilities. And so we last met on March 8th, and we talked about half of the facilities group, water pollution control and the maintenance function. And today we're going to talk about the other half of the facilities group, water treatment and supply, also touch on recreation and the laboratory function. So these are the 2 or 3 highlighted in green that we are going to talk about today. Same presentation, these first couple slides, so I'm going to go through them pretty quickly to talk about the facility. So last time we talked maintenance, water pollution control. Now highlighted in the red boxes, you see the org chart for the other part of facilities, laboratory, staff of 8, and water treatment and water supply, staff of 43. So we talked 2 weeks ago about the budget. So I've highlighted here the water quality. That's the lab function budget, approximately $1.6 million, which is 4% of the facility budget, not the district budget, the facility budget. And water treatment and supply, which is approximately $9.3 million, or about 21% of the facilities budget. The same comment held true for WPC and maintenance, holds true for water treatment and supply and lab. In the past decade, none of these groups has needed any special budget transfers. And it's certainly, again, a very positive comment on the ability of these folks that are engaged directly in the operations of infrastructure to stay within their approved budget. We had talked about succession. That's been a common theme in a lot of the discussion that we've had in these prior presentations on the strategic plan. And facilities as a group, we had mentioned this before, hired since COVID 15 new staff from outside, but we've promoted 25 internally, and 2 of those new hires have been promoted. And just like we saw with the other groups, you're going to see tonight the downward trend in the staffing levels over time of these 2 operating units.
Sorry, Tom.
We're good. You've heard this part before, Scott. So again, to touch on the succession plan, there's have been significant staff reductions. While we have increased in the complexity of the operational maintenance and compliance roles that these units fulfill, and that has been achieved through significant training that we have focused on over the last few years. And so now we'll get into the heart of the presentation. Andy Hubbard is going to speak on natural resources, and Ray Burrell is going to talk about water treatment and rec. But before we do that, we have a lot of staff here. And again, just like we had 2 weeks ago, I want them to have an opportunity to introduce themselves, because these are the unsung heroes, the leaders of our group, and you don't often have a chance to meet them and try and put a face and a name together. So I'm going to have the staff introduce themselves, and then Andy will lead off with the water supply presentation. So, Bob?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bob Rostowski. I'm the manager of water quality and the lab supervisor of the lab services department.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray Burrell. I'm the assistant manager of water treatment.
Andrew Hubbard, Natural Resources Administrator.
Good afternoon, Chris Harrison, Superintendent of Water Treatment. I work at West Hart Filters.
Good afternoon, Carl DeZonia, Supervisor, West Hartford Filters for Building and Grounds.
Good afternoon, I'm Allison Miner. I'm the supervisor for Reservoir 6 and Collinsville water treatment plants, and I've been in the MDC for 15 years.
Hello, everyone. I'm Trevor Roberts. I'm the supervisor of West Hartford Filters. I've been with MDC for 24 years.
Aaron Scott Rose, I work with the Facilities Maintenance Department. I've been here 18 years.
I'm Tim Anthony. I'm the hydroelectric supervisor. I've been with the district for 34 years.
Hank Martin, Chief of Police, MDC.
All right, so the water supply, my function is to protect our watersheds. We have a fairly small department. We have a bunch of watershed lands. MDC owns about 31,000 acres. 5,000 of it is in, almost 6,000 in Massachusetts, 25,000 in Connecticut. We have a pretty robust forestry program and forest management plan. We have several state licensed foresters. We get involved with wildlife management. The water supply also has about 100 miles of service roads running through our property, of which those roads get maintained by our staff. Bridges, dams, all that stuff gets maintained. We also perform watershed inspections on private lands within the watershed. There's about 3,300 private properties within the Bark-Hampstead and Nepaug watersheds, which were mandated by the state of Connecticut to do basically yearly or every other year inspections. We do about half of them each year. I also review and monitor land use proposals, which it has been kind of interesting lately. There's been a bunch of solar panel fields going up in Massachusetts in and around the watershed we've been keeping an eye on. It's just kind of a new wrinkle, something earlier in my career I wouldn't have expected I would have to be monitoring. We also respond to emergency spills within the watershed, and we'll get into a recent spill towards the end of my presentation. As everyone knows, we have a bunch of dams and reservoirs up in Bark-Hampstead, Nepaug, West Hartford, Resi 6, that area. We've got about 40 billion gallons of water stored when those reservoirs are full. We also perform flow management and releases. Tim Anthony's crew and his crew operate the Goodwin Dam hydroelectric facility. That facility produces enough electricity annually for about 2,000 homes, which is pretty neat. Timmy and his crew work very hard at keeping that operation up and running. We have about 44 miles of pipelines which bring raw water from the Nepaug and Bark-Hampstead to Reservoir 6 and West Hartford filters. At this point, if everybody could take a quick look at the map next to Chris there. Sort of hard to see. We should probably, would have been better if I had a slide of it, but that red, thank you, Chris, that red right there is the Bark-Hampstead watershed boundary. It's about 54 square miles. Nepaug is in the low 30s square miles wise. What's interesting to note about these is about 70% of that Bark-Hampstead watershed is protected, whether it's owned by the state of Mass, state of Connecticut, the MDC, or other properties that have, like conservation restrictions on them. Unfortunately, in Nepaug, we only control, between us and the state of Connecticut, only about 25%. The Nepaug Reservoir is pretty highly, is quite dense residentially. We have a tremendous number of inspections in there, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Last year, our inspector did about a little over 1,000 inspections. He got a late start. It was his first year on the job. We've got a bunch of technical updates that we're going to get to as well. We also, on both Nepaug and Bark-Hampstead properties, have a controlled deer hunt to keep the deer population down so that we can maintain good vegetation on the forest floor to protect MDC lands and to protect the watershed so we don't have a lot of erosion and sediment flowing into the reservoirs because of that. Thank you, Chris. And then, I don't know, when you want to put the video up? And I've got a couple of things. Let me show those while you're queuing up the video. I talked about the technology a little bit, upgrades that have gone on the watershed inspection program. This is one of 17 binders of individual pieces of papers of individual properties within the watershed. So as an example, this is Tonelli Road in New Hartford. We literally have 17 bindings this thick. The inspector would go out, inspect each property. It's a pretty simple, straightforward check the septic system, basic stuff. That's been condensed by our GIS department to this iPad, which is georeferenced, which is GPS enabled. So now our watershed inspector can literally pull into a driveway and mark vehicles with all this proper identification, as you see in that. It will literally be on that property. The GPS will enable it there. He can click, double check that it's the proper property, do his inspection. When he's done with his inspection, he literally presses save and it goes to the cloud. And if this thing gets lost or stolen, we're all set. In years past, this was a full-time job. The watershed inspector now is about 2 to 3 days a week during the growing season. These individual pieces of paper would then, in the old system, would get hand imported into the computer to generate a report, which is mandatorily provided to the health department for March 1st every year. So this has been should be a tremendous time saver. So right now we're down to about 2 days to 3 days a week during the growing season versus it was a full-time year-round job before. Just want to bring everybody's attention quickly. This is a booklet that gets handed out. I put one in every desk to everybody in the watershed. It's got a lot of information about the inspection process and just basic, good tips to be a good steward of your property. Oh, sorry. And our most recent addition is, this was our watershed inspector Mark Singh's idea. It's a door tag that he can leave after an inspection. And on the back of it, Nick Soleni had the great idea of putting a QR code, which goes directly to the watershed protection page on MDC's website. And what's really helpful about this is a lot of times the inspector will go to a home, there'll be something not super critical, like say a pile of topsoil from an addition in the building with no silt fence around it. So for him to try to go back and remind them they need to put their silt fence up, he can just leave them this note, and then they can get to work. On his way back to the office, he would also notify the town if he found something, or if it was something significant like a septic system. The health department gets notified when the ED and the town and the local health district. So that's kind of how that's handled now. But we're expecting this to be well received. In the era of Ring doorbell cameras, we've gotten an awful lot of phone calls recently. People didn't even know their properties were being inspected in a lot of cases, but now everybody knows, so it's one more thing that I think helps us do the job better and neater.
Andy, Commissioner, do you have a question?
Yes, I did, Andy. You mentioned that when you find something severe enough, the town and health departments get notified. Are they proactive to protect MDC's watershed areas?
They are, yeah. I mean, the health department specifically, if it's like a leaking septic system, something like that, they can be fairly aggressive. If it's something simple, like somebody doesn't have the silt fence down up properly, it depends on the town. Some of them are a little more proactive than others. But if we bring it to their attention and we consider it a threat to our water supply, they'll take it a little more seriously. We have a very good relationship with all the towns through years of hard work working with the towns. So they're pretty responsive to us.
And they notify us when corrective action is taken?
Yeah, no, we're in close contact with them. So
Thank you.
It seems to be working quite well. And I apologize, I didn't set that video up. That was the idea of Nick Salemi. When we were getting a lot of calls, again, this whole Ring doorbell thing and COVID thing, a lot more people were home the last couple years during inspections, so a lot more people took note of the inspection. That video is also on that watershed protection page. We distribute a link to that as we notify the towns. The watershed inspector, before he goes out each day, he notifies the town selectman's office and the local police department that he will be in their town and the streets in the town he will be on and the license plate and make model of the vehicle to just try to, avoid some confusion with people, with residents, I should say. And there we go. I spoke before about watershed protection and like potential spills. Just about 3 weeks ago, we had a dump truck on Route 202 in New Hartford get struck by a car. It tore a hole in the diesel tank. The road was crowned perfectly to pitch 30 to 40 gallons in the direction of a catch basin that flows into Neepog River. We were notified by Litchfield County Dispatch and immediately headed down. The local fire department, actually the Neepog Fire Department, responded quickly and had all the diesel fuel on the surface of the road pretty much mopped up as seen in that picture when we arrived. They hadn't really done anything with the river. Unfortunately, that catch basin exited out into the river. So our crews immediately cleared the brush around the catch basin, stuffed absorbent pads into the outlet pipe that outletted into the river. We put booms around the outlet pipe. We put booms immediately downstream from the outlet pipe. And then with our spill trailer, we set an additional 3 sets of booms downstream ahead of that spill. DEP was on site. DEP was very happy with the performance of the MDC crew. DEP called in an outside spill contractor to take it off of our hands. And actually that day, they did not do any additional implementation of anything because they were satisfied with the job that we had done. So we set a series of, it was over 4 sets of booms, 1 set on a really still section of the river. We had a series of pads in to soak up all the oil, and both DEP and ESI, the environmental spill contractor, thought that what we had done was enough and they were going to continue monitoring it. And I got a call yesterday that they removed the rest of the spill control materials. Just an example of something we do. We train for that every year. All the locations that we set the booms are actually in this book called the Emergency Spill Response Manual, which was last updated in 2022. We have a series of maps in here. I keep one of these in my truck. We have a set in a spill trailer, and everyone on the Barkhamsted and Hydro crew know this stuff because we practice for it and train every year. So it was a really good exercise, and the fact that DEP didn't feel that any more materials needed to be added to mop that up, I think is a credit to the training that we've done on that. And I think that's my last slide on watershed protection.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
I guess one of the things I'm curious about is as the population out there increases and they don't have this sewer system, they basically have septic tanks, is that correct?
That's correct. It's 100% on-site septic.
Is there some tipping point based on, in theory, based on some modeling, where the issue with regard to development and endangering the watershed becomes an issue? And what, I guess my question is, what recourse then do we have?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, currently in both Massachusetts and Connecticut, the codes for septic system installation are pretty strict. Setbacks from wetlands and streams and obviously drinking water reservoirs. We own, like I said, over 70% of Barkhamsted is pretty much permanently protected. It'd be nice to see that number increase in Neepog. Neepog would be a good spot if we did have funds to potentially, acquire some more lands. But yeah, it's certainly a valid concern and something where, we monitor all land use proposals within the watershed. So if somebody came along with a, giant subdivision plan or, wanted to clear 500 acres and put a golf course along the Neepog River, we would be on top of that for sure.
Now, is that something that we could stop, or essentially what would happen?
So if it was something that we thought was a threat to the watershed, we certainly we certainly would attend all the meetings and let the town and the state know that something we were concerned about. Again, with the current building codes and planning and zoning and wetlands regs and stuff, I think we're in pretty good shape. It's, back in the old days, maybe not so much, but nowadays, like I said, the engineering and all the studies that go into major development proposals, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Commissioner Van Dyke?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of questions. I believe you said that we own 6,000 acres in Massachusetts,
That's correct.
and maybe Mr. Jellison can help me out with this. I assume that we pay taxes on that land that we own. Is it designated as farmland, like we have it designated? Isn't it improved farmland is what we get taxed on it here in Connecticut?
Right, and the majority of our taxes are paid to the town of Colebrook, totaling $500,000 a year, roughly. But the majority of our land is paid, the taxes are paid to Colebrook. In other towns, it's different. I don't know what the total is. John, do you have the totals?
I can try to,
But in Massachusetts, it's designated as improved farmland, like
Yeah,
it is here in
so as an
Connecticut.
example, in Mass, I just actually saw our most recent assessment for the town of Granville, where we own a few thousand acres. It was $10 an acre.
Oh.
So, so we had 3,000 acres at $10 an acre.
Okay.
They don't use the same designation, class 1, 2, 3, like Connecticut does, so it's a little different.
And then my last question for right now is, on a spill like you were at the other day, do we as the MDC go after the insurance company for the accident to?
I know the insurance company would reimburse the environmental cleanup contractor. I think we're just taking protective measures from our end.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I don't believe we're going after a car accident that's on a road where the diesel fuel or gasoline goes into a catch basin owned by the town that leads to a river that eventually leads to our reservoir, that we're going after that individual.
I was just wondering whether or not that's something that, if it was a larger spill or something like that, I assume that we would look into that,
Mr. Mayor,
especially if we.
We're not mandated first responders, so when there's an accident like that, the local fire department is the mandated first responder. That's their job, that's their function. We do it more out of an abundance of caution to want to protect our resource. So we're not necessarily required to do it, but it's in our best interest that we do it. And so that's why we maintain the spill trailer, the supplies, the training, and all that, because we care more about our water quality than anyone else. And we want to get there first. And like you said, in this incident, we had a response probably better than what DEEP or the contractor would have had. That's why they saw our response and they said, yeah, we're good to go. We don't need anything else.
Okay.
So we're not a mandated responder, but we do it out of an abundance of caution to protect our water quality.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Commissioner Curry. This question is for Scott.
Yeah.
And I don't recall every line item in our budget, but do we have or have we ever had a line item that would allow MDC to purchase open space property?
Yes, we have, when I first got here, Andy, I'm sure he's going to talk about your forestry program, and that's somewhere in this presentation, right? But we have identified and prioritized properties surrounding the MDC watershed that we felt were strategic and should be purchased. And when I first got here in 2006, probably through 2010, we were budgeting anywhere from $250,000 to maybe $500,000 a year to purchase property if it became available. And we have not done that recently, but there is a constant watch on our part from Watershed to see if there's any property that comes available that we think would be beneficial. You may not want to buy a piece of property that's 100 acres that's already adjacent to a large development and they want $2 million for it, right? So there's a process that Andy will go through to determine, does it make sense to buy that property? And we, as Andy mentioned, we already own 70%. So there are some properties, if they were ever to become available, that we would definitely consider buying. But we do have a map, we have prioritized, and we're constantly, evaluating that.
Do we ever, Mr. Chairman, follow-up question?
Sure.
Do we ever contact, especially in the area that Andy mentioned where it's high private residences, and I'm not familiar with the area, but I'm guessing that there's farms out there. Do we ever contact the large acreage farmers and offer them a plan similar to what the state does with open space, that they continue to live, farm, but belongs to us, kind of?
Yeah. So the area that Andy was mentioning, which is Nepog, which is Canton, there is a much larger population. It's almost like West Hartford Filter, right? So Barkhamsted, you feel like you're in Vermont, you feel like you're in New Hampshire. But in Nepog, areas, portions, and I would say, Andy, help me if it's the northwest bottom corner of Nepog, or?
Yeah, the west of, if you look on the map next to Chris again, that whole western section next to Nepog River Reservoir, it's all white, it's residential small farms.
It's more like West Hartford Filter than it is like Barkhamsted. So it is residential homes, and, that's just, it is what it is, but.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fairly affluent area too, so largely if people have a problem with their septic system, they fix it. In the case of agriculture, there are quite a few smaller farms out there. Those farms, we have our watershed inspector work with them if they've got issues, and we link them up with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service. And in a lot of cases, the Natural Resources Conservation Service can come out and write what they call like a whole farm plan, where they have like agricultural best management practices, fencing cattle away from streams, manure storage, assigned like manure storage areas, stuff like that. So it's more than just us who's working on this. USDA covers all 50 states, and they're very concerned about water quality, whether it's, our water quality or the water quality to another water body. So they're another good partner for us.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to present today. Andy is fantastic. He's a wealth of information. He's definitely one of our valued members in our department. I'm going to talk a little bit about, our journey through water treatment really over the last 20 years. And I started here, I know a few of them mentioned when they started with the district. I started here in 2002. And really, ever since, that time, it's really been a journey of continuous improvement and, never-ending continuous improvement. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of overview of our treatment facilities, talk a little bit about some of the improvements that we've done, streamline some processes, a lot of cost savings along the way, and really, again, credit our staff here for doing what they do day in and day out to provide the services that we do to our customers. Water treatment, you think about the NBC, you think about water first. And, whether it's the wastewater services or the police services, everybody thinks about water when you think about the NBC. So nobody cares more deeply about water quality, our water sources, and our customers, the safety of our customers, the quality of the water, making sure that it meets and exceeds drinking water regulations day in and day out. It's not an easy task. And, everybody, within our department, they're 100% dedicated, they're all in, and they're always ready to respond whenever needed. And, again, we may make it look easy, but it's not easy, given the current climate change, seasonal changes, the intensity of storms. So we have a lot of challenges that we face day in and day out that a lot of people don't realize that require will require us to make a lot of operational changes on the fly. And because of the educated staff we have, the trained staff that we have, we're able to do that. So just to give you an overview of our West Hartford filter plant, design capacity is about 85 million gallons a day. That plant is located at West Hartford, Farmington Avenue, and a lot of you have visited the site, recreated around there. But it's a large area. We have 22 filters. 16 of them are half acre in size, and the other 6 are 3/4 acre in size. So the footprint of this facility is probably larger than you'll ever see again, in the future. It is a slow sand facility, so when I say compare like a West Hartford water treatment plant to a Reservoir 6 water treatment plant, Reservoir 6 is more of a rapid filtration rate. So just to give you a comparison, we'll say like 0.10 gallons per minute at West Hartford, so like 4 gallons per minute at Reservoir 6. So the process itself they both put out the same high quality of water, but again, Reservoir 6 is a complete conventional and West Hartford Filters is a slow sand. So there's some pros and cons, and again, West Hartford Filters went online in 1922, so it's not it's not a spring chicken anymore, but our guys do a tremendous job keeping those filters up to speed, and it's much different. The technology of a slow sand plant that size, it's not really being used anywhere else, today. The maintenance and the manual labor that goes into just cleaning a filter takes several days compared to, let's say, cleaning a filter at Reservoir 6, where it may take 15 minutes due to the process. But at any rate, the Reservoir 6 plant is a complete conventional plant. Coagulation, flocculation, it's more of a chemical process up front, whereas the slow sand plant is more of a biological process. The fully automated, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but completely fully automated, both West Hartford Filters and Reservoir 6 are manned one shift only, 8 hours a day, but they're 24/7 operations. So, after 4 o'clock, we all go home, and we allow our SCADA system to operate the plant as we have programmed it. And I'll go into that detail a little bit. The Collinsville plant is a small package plant that we operate in Collinsville, Connecticut. It goes back, this agreement really goes back with the Hartford Water Works and the Collinsville Water Company some 100 years ago. But at any rate, we operate the treatment plant and we serve the customers of Connecticut Water Company. Through this agreement, the Connecticut Water Company, they get 400,000 gallons a day delivered to their customers for free, and then everything after that, we charge them. That's the agreement, and that's where we are. But that is even though it's a small plant, it's a small package plant. It's highly complex. It's got a lot of bells and whistles with it. And again, that one there is only manned 8 hours a day as well. So right now, this is, where our presentation is water treatment and supply. It wasn't until like 2014 where we actually merged these departments together. They've operated as separate entities from 2006 all the way up to 2014. So allowing us to merge these departments together really aligned our goals. It made more sense to run the department as a whole with water supply and water treatment. So we were very fortunate to do that. And while we were able to do that, we were able to actually consolidate some positions as well. You could see, through the graph there, just in 2010, water treatment and supply collectively had a staff of 70, whereas today we're looking at a staff of 43. So that's a difference of 27 positions. And as you can see, as with the budget, you see the budget fluctuations a little bit, but with the commodities increases, that's pretty much across the board around any utility right now. Chemical costs have skyrocketed, electrical costs have increased, but overall, we're doing what we can to minimize the cost. In reference to producing a gallon of water. And I think that's probably reflective by the rate decrease that we've seen this year. But, through the years and ever since the journey began for me in 2002, we've continuously increased our automation within all the treatment plants, increased our training, and with the job consolidations that we've had occur over the several years ago, we were able to now cross-train employees into other different tasks. So, for instance, our facility maintainer ones, who are under Carl DeSaulniers' direction, they're primarily buildings and grounds, but now within their job description, they help Filter Hero, where they actually drive the tractor through the filter and clean the filter bed themselves. And Carl, again, to his credit, he's a supervisor of building and grounds, but also supervises our reconditioning crew, where they actually clean the sand in a particular filter, which can take up to 8 months. So we have temporary workers that come in, and Carl will supervise them as well. So that's, again, the labor-intensive process at West Hartford Filters that you don't see at West Hartford Reservoir 6. Now, I will say, a lot of the things that we've done, let's say around 2006, where Reservoir 6 itself wasn't really an automated plant. Scott Jellison came on board as COO, and he made many department tours during his early years as COO. And he's always asked the question, why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing it that way? And I think that mindset, again, towards continuous improvement and actually questioning why we do something this way, just because it's been done that way for 20 to 50 years doesn't mean that we need to be doing it today. Because if you take a business model that you created when you opened up your business 40 years ago, you can't operate with that same business model today. And that's kind of the philosophy that we've adopted. In 2006 and 2007, Reservoir 6 was not automated at all. So we didn't have no automation at all. If the operators needed to make a flow rate change, adjust the chemical, they'd have to physically go on and do that locally. Data collection, that was all done manually as well. The treatment plant was littered with strip charts and circular charts. The data wasn't even in one central location, so you couldn't really make informed decisions. At that time, and right around that period, we hired Scott LaRose, who was one of our primary integrators here. And not only did we automate Reservoir 6, but Scott took it upon himself to write the program, pull the wires, make the prints. He did it all himself. And next thing you know, Reservoir 6 automation was born. And that's the effort of our staff in-house that, for probably, $100,000, saved the district over $900,000. That's the kind of effort it would have taken to automate, to give us the level of automation that I'm talking about. Those improvements continue on. What we did, the Collinsville plant was actually run out of our water supply department. So there was up to five employees working out of that Collinsville water treatment plant. And, coming from the private sector, I had experience working at multiple plants, and through automation, we were able to work out a plan, and we developed another program and brought that information collectively over to Reservoir 6. So we absorbed 4 employees in other departments, and we kept 1 employee. So we reduced the staff by 4 employees at the Collinsville plant down to 1, and brought that 1 person onto the Reservoir 6 staff, and we ran Reservoir 6 and Collinsville collectively out of Reservoir 6. So that's where Allison comes in. Allison is the supervisor for both plants, so she has the responsibility for 2 treatment plants. Again, regardless of the size, whether it's a 42 MGD or 1 MGD, if there's a problem, they all have the same problem. But Allison is, one of our rising stars, just to tout her resume a little bit. She started in the wastewater field as an operator. She trained over there. She got her license. She got proficient in every treatment process, and then decided that she wanted to come over to the water side, which she did. She ended up getting her license, Class 4 license, and being promoted to crew leader, and now supervisor. So, this is the future that we're looking at here. Chris Pearson, the superintendent, the future of our department, and I think we're in a really good place right now. getting back to the continuous improvement where it never ends. And, you know, we've had tremendous amount of people retire. A lot of institutional knowledge going out the door. And honestly, you know, in the workplace today, in the workforce, in this industry, there's nobody available. Everybody's fighting for the same individual. And all the experience in the water treatment field has really just gone out the door, and there's just, you know, no experience out there to get. You know, recognizing that fact, and the fact that we had a lot of aging employees getting ready to retire, and what we started working on probably about 7 years ago was enhancing the automation at the slow sand plant. Again, this is a 100-year plant. So we started enhancing the automation in there. Again, through the assistance of our maintenance department, our electricians, our mechanics, and also our integrator, Scott LaRose, we were able to identify all the areas that we needed in order to run this facility with one shift. This is a plant that ran 3 shifts, 24/7 for, you know, over almost 100 years. So, because we just fully went to one shift operation last year, and it's really a credit, and it is, you know, certainly challenging, but, you know, when you have the right people on the bus, you could get the job done. And so that's what we did. And right now, you know, we operate one shift, and we have on-call operators that are available in the case of an emergency. And, you know, when you're doing something like this, every you know, card is unturned, where you got to ensure that, you know, the safety for every treatment process. Wherever there's an issue, you're going to be able to go ahead and address that either remotely or on site. This is just to give you a couple. We're going to give you a SCADA overview in a minute, but what we see here is our overview pages for our West Hartford filters and our Reservoir 6. And again, this is our SCADA system, supervisory control and data acquisition system. This is our lifeline here. This is where all the information the operators have they need is at their fingertips. You know, through these systems, we could drill down, we could gather information, data, we could collect data, trending, alarms, it's all here. And again, a credit to our staff, because what we do and what we add each and every week, even, we keep building upon this system that only, you know, makes us better. So we'll go ahead and go right to the SCADA demo here.
So while they're pulling that up, so when we met on the 8th, we saw a little bit of the WPC, Water Pollution Control SCADA. And so now you're going to see some of the water treatment. It's all the same system, it's just where it's applied. So whether it's at the wastewater treatment, whether it's at the water treatment plant, very similar design so that we can function, staff can go between facilities, a very commonality of design. And one of the things that we've done in collaboration with engineering that has been fantastic is on every new project we've done, we mandate that all of our consultants in design use the same integrator, and our contractors have to use the same integrator. So when we put multiple systems together between contracts, we have no integration issues. It's a seamless between one building coming onto the network or another plant coming onto the network. So it's been incredibly beneficial for the district. And, you know, also kudos to finance for helping us work that through in our documents when we go to bid. So it's a great story of how we've really got a tremendous product for the district, because we were able to procure the right services, we were able to engineer the right services, and then we received them in the operating and maintenance group. So fantastic overall effort for the district.
So what we're looking at here is the West Hartford Filters overview screen, and you could see that, I'm not sure if it'll reach over there, there we go. So you'll have our series, these are our filters here. So we all together, we have 22 filters, and, you know, within this overview screen, what we like to see is as much information as possible without having to drill down. And everywhere along the treatment train process, we have instruments measuring the quality of the water. So we'll know up front if there, you know, let's say for an instance, we have a heavy rain event and just the reservoirs have gotten stirred up. We've gotten, you know, 4 or 5 inches of rain and the reservoirs has gotten stirred up. We'll see that immediately upon our instruments before the water enters our treatment process. You know, we're monitoring filter levels, storage tank levels, pH, chlorine, turbidity, UV 254, measuring the organics in the water. And we're capturing it, again, along the treatment train, out of every individual filter, and then out of every combined group of filters as well, what we call the combined filter effluent, which is, you know, very, very important before the water enters the storage tanks. So along with the treatment processes itself, you know, our storage tanks on site, and then the watering entering the distribution system, we're monitoring the flows as well. We also responsible for a number of water quality instrumentation systems within the distribution system, and aside from a couple rechlorination stations that we maintain out in the distribution system as well. So this time of year, you know, all the reservoirs are full, and if you can't really probably read that right now, but you know, we're down below a half a foot from the spillway at Reservoir 5, and that's typically by design, because that's kind of a balancing reservoir for us. We control the flows from our Barkhamsted and Nepog reservoirs. We have 3 metering pits that I control the elevation and flows for all the reservoirs, ensuring that we maintain an adequate supply locally, as well as watching the reservoir capacities out in our Barkhamsted area, some 30 miles away from here. So Reservoir 6, you'll see here a much different treatment plant. 6 filters, 42 million gallons a day, whereas, you know, you had 22 filters, 85 million. Again, it's just, again, another overview of the processes all along the way. This is another cutout of another page here. This is our filter 3 overview. We have, again, the 6 filters, but we could drill down. We could operate open and close valves if we wanted to with a click of a mouse. Everything is pretty much on a program, so when we do backwash a filter, we have that program written, and it's a matter of the operator observing it, and the backwash is initiated and goes through the process. I want to point something out for you, though. It was around 2010 to 2011 or so. We had a filter upgrade project, and so we were 21 MGD, 21 million gallons a day, and then we embarked on an upgrade project. That brought us to 42 million gallons a day. We didn't have to add any treatment processes. All we had to do was change the under drain of our filters. Before we had what they call the wheeler bottom system. It was a concrete system with gravel on top, and the filtration rate was limited with that design. With the new Leopold low profile under drain block, we were able to add 30 inches of media, 18 inches of anthracite on top of 12 inches of sand. And then this little black cap there, there's IMS cap, integral media support cap, was able to support the media without adding the stone that was in the previous application. So we're just changing out the under drain system, changing out some piping. We increased the capacity from 21 MGD to 42 MGD. And that provides us the opportunity to meet peak system demands, especially in the summertime. Because one of the issues, not that our flows are tremendously high, because we're only averaging about 47 million gallons a day, right now, but there are those periods and times where you have peak demands, and you can't exceed your filter rate during those peak demand periods. So that's where we ran into a problem having a 21 MGD plant. It wasn't that we were doing 21 million gallons a day, but it's those peak periods, those peak hours where we'd be in violation if we didn't upgrade the plant. This is an overview. We also have our Barkhamsted water supply. If you see the beautiful Seville Dam over there, We have the elevation, constantly monitoring the elevation. We have Lake McDonough downstream of that with Richards Corner Dam. And we're also monitoring the elevations there, monitoring the flows through the Seville Lower Gatehouse. We have all that information coming back to us. And, you know, what's more important is that everything is alarmed, low, high, you name it, everything is alarmed, and we want to know when there's an issue, because we can't be everywhere, but we could try to be through our technology. Lastly, the RBAS system. This is a great overview here. This is really a snapshot of what's going on in the distribution system right now, which is very helpful to the treatment plant operators, specifically when there's a main break. We want to know where that is in the system, how it's affecting us, and we can certainly see that through the elevation drop, or within a distribution system at one of the storage tanks, or an increase of flow at one of our pressure regulating valve pits. So again, all the tools at our fingertips, and we continually try to add to it, always. We're very fortunate that our water supply system was built in such a manner where it allowed us a gravity flow to the treatment plants. No pumping is involved from our sources to our plants, and the plants themselves aren't very energy intensive, but we try to do what we can as far as saving energy, saving electrical cost. And one example of that is this lighting upgrade that occurred just a couple of years ago at all of our facilities up in Barkhamsted, Reservoir 6, Collinsville, West Hartford Filters, and up in West Branch. And, collectively, you can see, the project cost, the incentive amounts, and really the payback is really a no-brainer on something like this. And we're realizing an annual savings collectively through our department of, just over $84,000 a year. So, that's not chump change to either one of us. So anywhere you can save money, we're going to do that. Camera system. We have nearly 300 cameras deployed around the district, and we're continually adding to that. Water supply and treatment, we have, over 60 cameras, 76 in total, actually, that we have around. So, you look back at, 9/11, and then what occurred after that, most of the utilities were mandated to do a vulnerability assessment. And some of the hardening of those processes included adding security or cameras, provide that extra set of eyes. But, in our line of business, that's great. In Hank's business, chief of police, it's even better. But we also use cameras for process control. And we find it very helpful, if you don't have to walk to a facility to see, to get your eyes on something, you can do that through the camera system. And this camera system is very easy to access, via a secure portal. And it's extremely helpful, especially in inclement weather. We have, again, from Barkhamsted to West Hartford, the weather changes dramatically. A storm event like we had the nor'easter just last week, where we had 0 inches in West Hartford and 14 inches in Barkhamsted. Having the cameras, and we're able to actually dispatch people too if you have to plow, and we could actually see that real time with our cameras. I'm going to give you a little demonstration, just to give you a little snapshot. I'm not going to bring up any water treatment facilities or watershed facilities just because of this is being publicly aired. Don't need anybody to know where all our cameras are. So just like any other security, you see security cameras, you got them at home right now. It's not really, groundbreaking presentation right now. But what we'll see here, we got really a snapshot of 4 different locations. So we have on the upper left, we have really one of our facility maintenance garages. Certainly, there's been a lot of theft going on, catalytic converters, things of that nature. But we want to make sure that we have a set of eyes on all of our facility parking lots, which we do. Also on the upper right is one of our water pollution control processes, grit chamber, where you can't really see it from here, but you can actually, water is moving through that process there. And then the other snapshots are just our central equipment maintenance garages as well, where we could actually drill down, zoom in, we could do a number of things with our cameras. But it's, again, having the level of, the clarity of the cameras themselves and the technology is tremendous, where, again, you could actually just zoom in and these are being recorded continuously. So if we ever needed to go back and retrieve data, we certainly have the capability to do that. All right, let's talk about recreation a little bit. Certainly everybody knows West Hartford, Reservoir 6. Everybody, loves to walk over there. We have, many, many trails. But, the reality is the MDC is really the second most visited recreation site just behind the state of Connecticut State Park. So we get thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people a year visiting our locations. These are just a few of what we have for recreational facilities, and look at the acres that the public has, at their fingertips to explore. You have West Hartford and Reservoir 6, Lake McDonough, West Branch and Goodwin, and then West Branch and Greenwoods. And the number of 41 miles of trails at West Hartford and Reservoir 6 is phenomenal for anybody that loves to, hike and bike and bring their family out for some exercise. But what I like to point out here is that with all this passive recreation comes a price where, our building and grounds crew in West Hartford Filters and our water supply department up in Barkhamsted, they have to maintain all this area, for public safety and for environmental management of the property itself. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. People that are walking around the reservoir on the red loop may not realize it, but tree hazards. We got to keep the place plowed, mowed. It's a tremendous effort, a tremendous amount of resources that we utilize to provide this benefit, not only to our customers, but for all those visiting our areas. There's just a map. If anybody's looking for a map with all the trails that are designated, they could download this map from our MDC website. But this is the West Hartford Reservoir System. You see our series of reservoirs there, red loop, yellow loop, and also you have access to the Metacomet Trail as well. Reservoir 6, again, this is another outline of our recreational areas that we're allowed. All right. Now, lastly, I'd just like to touch upon, Andy had mentioned the hydroelectric facility at Goodwin. We had a hydroelectric facility at our Colebrook, at the Colebrook River Lake Army Corps of Engineers, and we had recently done an analysis. We knew that, it was costing us a little bit more money than we wanted to see, and it required a lot of capital improvements in the future. And then really that cost analysis proved that, we're just going to discontinue the use of that hydro facility, and we terminated our agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2019. The riparian agreement, that continually is ongoing. We are, required to deliver either 21.7 billion gallons annually to the Farmington River Power Company, or in lieu of that, if we don't make that delivery, we will could pay up to $250,000 a year. Typically, I don't think that'll be the case. We certainly, on a good year, we'll certainly have enough precipitation to deliver most, if not all, of that water to the Farmington River Power Company. And just to add a little bit onto the recreation, some of the other improvements that have been made to the processes in regards to our boat launch at Lake McDonough. We went to an online payment system. So people could go online with credit cards, whereas in years past we had summer help employees actually collecting cash as the visitors would come in. So that's no longer a practice. We have season passes now, so that whole process has been streamlined. I know that Chief Martin may touch upon that as well from his end, but that whole process has been streamlined, and it's been seeing a cost savings on that. This is our staff here. This is the Reservoir 6 staff. So what you see right now is a staff level. We have a couple more operators going to be joining our crew soon. But currently, right now, this is the group that operates 2 water treatment facilities. Not an easy task. They're talented, and they know what they're doing. So, again, these are Class 4 water treatment facilities. These are licensed operators. Requires, again, a level of education and experience to obtain that certification. This is our West Hartford Water Treatment. This is a combination of our treatment plant operators and our building and grounds crew. So kneeling on the ground, you see Trevor Roberts over here, who keeps everybody in line, and also next to him is our manager of water treatment and supply, Jim Randazzo. So, if you take a look at the group, this is a great group of people that, I enjoy coming to work with every day. And that's the way we do it here. We come to work and work as a family, and you approach each day like this is our first day, and never stop improving, and that's what we do. And that's why I give our department, the people that work for me, a tremendous amount of credit. And they're protecting our customers, protecting the MDC, and always willing to do 100%, if not more. So, take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioners? No? Anyone?
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again, everybody. Again, my name is Bob Rostowski. I'm the manager of water quality in the laboratory department. The MDC operates 2 laboratories within this department. One is in Bloomfield at Reservoir 6 that takes samples or receives samples and analyzes mostly drinking water samples. And then the other laboratory in Hartford at the Hartford WPCF. Lab staff takes samples along with operators, conduct the analysis of wastewater at the Hartford WPCF, and also the 3 satellite facilities, as you know, right, East Hartford, Rocky Hill, and Pequannock. Going back to the Bloomfield laboratory, we're lucky at the Bloomfield lab where we actually have sample lines piped into a glassware room where we can actually take samples constantly fed into the laboratory. Also, the operators there will take samples at Reservoir 6. And then we also receive on a daily basis samples from West Hartford, Collinsville, and also the watershed. I just wanted to point out real quick, we had questions earlier about how would we know if there's problems with water quality in our reservoirs. So we may get to that tipping point where septage fields, leachate fields are failing. We'll notice that in our sampling of the watershed. We'll see nutrients start to spike. We're out there on a continual basis taking many more samples than are required regulatorily. So those are samples of the watershed and of the water treatment plants for the drinking water purposes. We also have an operator who is lab staff, and he goes into the distribution system and collects a minimum of 180 samples per month within the distribution system. So we test the water that we serve our customers. Again, a minimum of 180, we're usually averaging about 190 to 200 in 1 month. And obviously that does not include Saturdays and Sundays, so we're getting about 10 samples a day all throughout the district. That sampling plan was approved by DPH years ago, so we have a representative number of samples across the entire distribution system on a daily basis. And we basically have a schedule Monday through Friday, different routes that we have to take. Once we get those samples, we conduct approximately 123,000 analyses on these samples to ensure compliance and quality. And at the Bloomfield lab, we have a staff of 4. We'll see the pictures of staff and some of the work that we do as I go on. Our other laboratory, again, is at Hartford. Lab staff, again, their samples out in the treatment plants. Operators take samples at Hartford, Rocky Hill, East Hartford, and Pequannock. We conduct about 62,000 analyses of wastewater to ensure compliance and quality. And we have a staff of 3 there. Our drinking water lab is ruled by regulation by the state of Connecticut DPH. And the wastewater labs are ruled by permits that are issued by the Department of Environmental Protection. One of the things that we do, along with taking samples, conducting analyses, is also then report this data. Again, 2 different categories, drinking water and wastewater. The reports that we generate for the drinking water side of our operation are produced by the laboratory and submitted to Department of Public Health on a monthly basis. That's some of those reports are the distribution system monitoring reports, the water treatment plant monitoring reports. Those are sent in again on a monthly basis. Analytical requirements change throughout the year so that there are always new things that we have to do on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, sometimes every 3 years, every 8 years in some cases. We also provide data to the water treatment plants. Ray had mentioned that there's a lot of online instrumentation. One of the things that the laboratory has to do is on a daily basis run samples that coincide with those online meters to verify that the online meters are working properly. Maintenance has their role in that, where they're calibrating the instrumentation, making sure everything's running properly, but then it's just another check. Let's check turbidity, the online meter versus the laboratory measurement. We also generate reports internally for our customers. When there's a broken water main, operations will go out and repair that water main. We will get samples from we refer to them as repair samples. So we'll get some samples from them, and I have some items to demonstrate in a little bit here. Also, another internal analytical report would be new mains. So when the engineering group goes out and installs new mains, there's requirements that they sample those water mains, certain amount of distance along the new main, and that it passes all the criteria that are required by DPH. Other reports that we generate for drinking water would be information that's submitted through the Consumer Confidence Report. So that's something I work with Nick on. I have a deadline of next week to produce some of that data so that we can get this report ready for issuance in July. So if you remember the water quality report, the Consumer Confidence Report, there's a table towards the end of that. All that data comes from the laboratory. Other reports are lead and copper. We are required to participate in EPA's lead and copper monitoring program, where we go out and we actually deliver sample bottles to customers. They take the samples in a certain fashion, and we report that data. One good point to make about that is we are on what is referred to as reduced monitoring. Our lead and copper that is sent to customers, or it's actually, as the water enters the house, sometimes it picks up some lead and copper within those houses, but our water is treated to such an extent that we have extremely low amounts of lead and copper in our drinking water. Again, the most important thing to know about that is there is no lead and copper in our drinking water, in our reservoirs, and in our water mains. Once that water enters into somebody's house, they may pick up a little lead and copper from copper pipes, lead solder, et cetera. But the treatment chemicals that we add are, and that we maintain on a constant basis, are designed to prevent any leaching of that, or excessive leaching, I should say. One of the other reports that we are involved with, or reporting functions, is through EPA's Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. UCMR is the abbreviation. And that is a process every 5 years. EPA comes up with a different list of chemicals, parameters of concern that they want us to monitor for to make sure there are no problems in our drinking water. And that could be the source of drinking water. The pipes in the street, are we picking up any contaminants from the pipes in the street? And then even in houses, again, like lead and copper. There might be a few other things in addition to that, but one important note to make about that is that we're not responsible for the water within somebody's house, technically, but actually we are. So somebody could put in some really bad plumbing, and if we take a water sample at that tap, and it exceeds any of the EPA levels, we're required to respond and assist the customer. So it's not our job to then rip out the pipes or anything else like that, but we would assist them, give them advice. There's a whole page on the website about lead and copper specifically, and steps that you can take to minimize your exposure to lead and copper. We're doing sampling this year. EPA has revised those rules so that everybody starts fresh in 2024. We're going to have a whole new set of sample locations and requirements to report on. Switching over to the, yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bush.
Hi, this is Commissioner Bush. Hey, just do you happen to have any data regarding the percentage of buildings that may still have some sort of lead, whether it's pipe or solder, that could affect people?
Sure, I don't particularly have that information.
All.
Okay. That's a good percentage.
EPA banned lead, 50/50 lead solder in 1986, and probably they continued to use it until the lead 50/50 solder ran out, which is probably 10 years later. So the ironic part of this rule is in 1986, EPA banned lead paint. If you renovated a school, which happened here in Hartford, in other cities, Stanford, if you renovate a school, you have to remove lead paint from 6 feet above the floor. So in other words, young kids are under the age of 6 are able to touch and feel lead paint and eat lead paint. The mandate does not require them to remove lead solder pipes from the renovation. So any public building renovated by using public funds is required to remove lead paint and asbestos, but not lead pipes. So we had a number of schools here in Hartford where they renovated, spent $40 million renovating the school, but they kept the old piping and could not meet the water quality standards. And then they're asking us, our staff, what do we do? And we said, rip out the pipes. So this is just bureaucracy at its worst, but the majority of the problem is plumbers. You might remember in 2014, President Obama banned a certain percentage of, what was it, from their brass? It was
there was lead content in lead-free brass. Sorry, lead-free brass actually contained still some lead.
So we had to abandon about $300,000 worth of material, stock, valves, those kinds of products, brass products that touch water. And unfortunately, I'm sure in 1986, when they did the same thing of lead solder, 50/50 solder, they chose not to, right? It was too expensive to not do it. So I'm sure homes, developments over the 90s, in the early 2000s, still continued to use the 50/50 solder. Now it's 95/5 antimony and tin, or whatever the mixture is. But, and now they're even using plastic pipe and all that good stuff. So you would probably, if a home was built within, 15 years ago, it's got lead solder in the pipes.
Thank you. I have a couple of just a really fast follow-ups. That lead solder would be from the meter in, or would there be any lead still from that meter to the street, to the?
So we are, as we just talked about, we're in the process of mandated because of Flint, Michigan. So what happened in Flint, Michigan was, Flint, Michigan tried to save money. The city was going bankrupt. So they decided, they had a great idea. Let's save money, and instead of taking water from the Great Lakes, like Barkhamsted, they felt that they could save money by taking it from the Flint River, which was atrocious. It was contaminated. And in addition to that, they also felt it was important to get rid of $30,000 worth of orthophosphate, which is a chemical which we use to stop lead in pipe migrating into water. So it on a chemical balance, it stops the migration of lead from a lead service to the water. And so because of Flint, Michigan, as we always say, we don't own the water service to the property. We don't own the sewer lateral to the property. But because of Flint, Michigan, Flint, Michigan had to go in and replace everyone's water service. And in a lot of cases, the water services were actually lead pipe. Now, because of all of that, we are all across the country mandated to test and verify that none of our lead services from the street to the home are lead. And that's what this project is all about. We believe that we found, actually when 2014 when this happened, we found documentation in our files, district files, in the vault, that even in 1917, a Hartford Water Commission was looking at the decision of whether or not they should use lead water services, and the answer at that time was no. So we believe we're in very good shape, that we're not going to find any lead services, but the process to get there is what we're doing now. We're mandated, everyone's mandated to go out and actually inspect and verify every service that goes to our homes, 102,000 of them, to make sure we understand. If we have the documentation and say it's copper, fine. Or wrought iron, fine. But if we don't and have no documentation that we're not sure what it is, we actually have to go dig it up. So that's the process we're going through right now.
I appreciate that answer. I didn't expect it to be such a large answer, but that's a great answer. And I do have one last question. I don't know if there's an answer to it at this point. Scott did mention that there's a lot of plastic pipe these days, and I know that there's a big thing with BHA or BHT and the pipe, and I've used plastic pipe in my job. So is there any testing currently or exists that tests any leaching of plastic or any microplastics or any contaminations from the plastic into drinking water in people's homes?
There's none that we do. There's no testing that we do, but then all of that piping material is tested and made sure that, so the manufacturing companies would be the ones that do that testing to make sure that no plastic components leach out. So we could, some of the parameters that we monitor for might provide you some information, but we've not seen many problems. In fact, it's odd that sometimes the problem that we might see is somebody changes out the pipes at their kitchen faucet and will call us and tell us the water tastes funny. And we go and test. And then we find out through communication and question and answer that you have plastic pipes. Oh, does it taste like plastic? And the answer is, yeah, it kind of does taste like plastic, and then have to just share that with the homeowner. So just to go back to lead and copper, Scott pointed out 1986 is when they banned mostly lead solder. Our current sample pool is from houses built in 1986. So we go out and sample 50 of those homes every 3 years. And as Scott mentioned, we add 2 chemicals to make sure we don't get any corrosion of pipes. One is sodium hydroxide to increase the pH. You don't want to have your water be acidic. That was one chemical that Flint did not add, and they were basically pumping acidic water through their entire distribution system. So of course, acidic water is going to leach anything out of the pipes that might be there. The other, again, like Scott mentioned, is orthophosphate. We add a phosphate corrosion inhibitor, and it forms a layer on the inside of a pipe so that it prevents any lead, copper, or anything else from leaching out of that pipe. Now that we're into the revised lead and copper rule, as Scott mentioned, we have to go and investigate all of our connections to make sure that no service lines are lead. And after that inventory is done, we will then have a new sample pool that we will go out next year, and we have to sample 100 of those sites. In addition to that, one of the things that came up, and again, related to previous discussion, is we will also be required to sample 20% of all the schools in our distribution system. So 20% per year for 5 years. So we have one round of sampling all the schools through high school, so high school and below, unless that school was built in 2006, I think that is, or after. So it's looking for schools that have been built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that might still have lead in their buildings. We are required to provide them with sample containers to take 5 samples per school. Not only schools, but then also daycares. Any place where a child is taken care of as an infant or through secondary or through primary school. And again, we'll have to provide the sampling equipment, conduct the analysis, and do the reporting to EPA. Not only to the customer, of course, but also to EPA.
And just to add on the wastewater side, while we're doing this requirement of DPH, it makes all the sense in the world. We're not just looking at the water service, we're actually at the same time going to do the sewer service. So while we're doing all this exercise to verify where the water service is in the material, we're also including the wastewater service, so we have good records on both.
And just to add to that, we are required to monitor wastewater on a quarterly basis for metals. And if we find high elevated levels of copper, lead, or zinc is another corrosion inhibitor that may have been used in some utilities, DEEP will require that we remove that from the treatment plants. So one study to handle both sides of the pipe.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Question regarding the 20% for schools tested. Is that 20% across the board, or is that 20% of each of the member towns?
It's 20% across the board, but of all member towns. So if you get our drinking water and you have a school in that town, we're required to test that. Ultimately, over 5 years, we will test every school that gets our water.
Thank you.
Quick question. I happened to run across this report that EPA announced a proposal for national primary drinking water regulations having to do with PFAS. So my question would be, what does the future look like? What are we doing to meet this, even though I doubt it's going to come into finalization by the end of 2023? But if we have to do it, obviously, at some point, what are we doing?
Right. Yeah, that's a proposed rule. EPA has announced 2 parameters that have a very, very low concentration, a maximum contaminant level of 2 parts per trillion, an extremely low level for 2 of the PFAS compounds. They have also proposed an additional 4 compounds to have a health advisory index. So it's just a calculation that you have to run. We, as part of, and it's convenient that we're right on the slide, as I mentioned, we have the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. Every 5 years, EPA comes up with a list.
Can you say that again?
Unregulated contaminant monitoring rule.
Unregulated.
Yep. And what the industry believes are the most current contaminants to be concerned about. We've monitored for these PFAS compounds previously, and we did not detect them. But we did not really look at that low-level 2 parts per trillion. And the best analogy I can give you is you're looking across the room. I can't see the printing on the flag. So it's that type of level. We looked, we took samples, we provided analysis, and we can't see PFAS. Now I'm going to take out a pair of binoculars, and I'm going to zoom in on that flag, and I'll be able to read every single letter. So that's what we're doing now. We're measuring for much lower concentrations of these parameters. So as part of what is now, and I'll use the acronym so I don't have to say Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, again, UCMR 5. This is the 5th iteration of the EPA program, where EPA comes up with a list, again, every 5 years. There are, on this list, 29 PFAS compounds and lithium, the metal lithium. We've already taken samples. We did not detect at a very high range. We've taken samples now. We're waiting for those results. And we get an opportunity to review them and comment on them before we publish them to the public. So we've taken samples already for 29 PFAS compounds and lithium. We're required to take quarterly samples over a 12-month period. So the UCMR 5 requires monitoring of all utilities in the country. And over a 2-year period, 23 to 24, we must monitor for these parameters 4 consecutive quarters. So that's where we're going with that now. Really, the big thing to know about PFAS is, where is it coming from? If we detect something, DPH might turn around and say, well, you need to put in a $100 million improvement at some of your treatment plants to remove it. And my question always back is, why aren't you removing it from the source? So we're very, very lucky that we have this watershed system that's well protected. It's Class A water, which means it does not get wastewater discharges. So most of the times when you find PFAS, it's chemical contamination, wastewater discharges. And just think about New Orleans, right? At the base of the Mississippi River, that water is used and reused so many times from the northern stretches of the Mississippi River all the way down. So community takes drinking water out of the river, generates wastewater, discharges it. And wastewater treatment plants are not designed to remove PFAS. So there are communities out there that are not as lucky as we are, and that will have problems. When they do their own UCMR 5 monitoring, they will detect, I don't know what level, and it wouldn't be a good guess to even speculate what that might be.
So this process is just a normal bureaucratic EPA process. And when they do not have a regulation on something, they go through this testing process across the country, and then they gather data, and then eventually you have a lead and copper rule, or a PFAS rule. So they will create some kind of regulation in the future for drinking water that everyone will be mandated to comply with. DPH has already said publicly that there's some options that water utilities could do, meaning they could buy water from someone like MDC, they could drill a new well, they could mix their water with someone like MDC, but there's so much unknown at this point because we're really in the early stages of testing across the country that we just don't know what that regulation will be. But you will have a circumstance where if MDC's non-detect in 2014 remains to be true through this process, which is much more rigorous, and as Bob said, we're looking at it not in the parts per billion, but parts per trillion. We may have a lot of water utilities mandated to buy water from the MDC, like for example Portland, the town of Portland. They are only buying 400,000 gallons a year from us, and if they had some issues or someone else had some issues and they had to abandon their well, there's a strong possibility that although we're not going to see growth in population within the MDC district towns to any significant level, you might start to see the PFAS mandates force municipalities or private water utilities to buy MDC water.
Chairman DeMello.
One of the things that I've at least been reading and seeing is the use of carbon filters, and that seems to be the position the DEP is taken, and EPA is taken, but don't they, it's a very expensive process, by the way, but don't they also have a problem relative to when you're dealing with that kind of an issue? Dilution is, we'd have to move water from one source to another. Do we have that capability, Scott, when we start talking about, because what you're talking about is dilution, to get the dilution factor
Yeah.
down to the percentage of,
Sure.
Yeah,
So there's two types of treatment technology that's out there, and one is carbon, and another one is ion exchange. Ray pointed out earlier how all water flows by gravity from Barkhamsted all the way through the treatment plants into downtown Hartford with incredibly high pressure. Great, no pumping is needed. If we were to put in technology like this, we would have to pump to treatment technology. So we'd have to build almost like another mini treatment plant at each one of the treatment plants, and either choose carbon, which requires a larger footprint, and it doesn't last as long as ion exchange. And ion exchange would be something that you would have like a Brita filter at home, or in-sync type of filter. Again, very expensive, would require new treatment plant processes at each one of our treatment plants. And then the other issue, Chairman, would be the disposal of the media. So after you remove PFAS onto the carbon, what are you going to do with that?
right, you're ultimately going to have to either burn it or create a heat.
Yep.
Whether it wouldn't be an open flame heat, but you're going to have to put the fleet to it, destroy it at what, about 1,100 degrees centigrade?
14, I think, but yeah, close, very close to that. Yeah, so it's like 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
Waste is hazardous waste. 11, I think, or 12 is PFAS.
Yeah, so so that's what's happening. The carbon filter system is very expensive, and right now they're sending, whoever is using the carbon filters, there's only really one place in the United States, Utah, that they're sending filters. I hate to say this, but since we're talking about it, I'm going to say it. You know I'm going to say it.
No,
but I'm going to say it.
Feel free to.
We are required under this program to test 4 quarters. And as we talked about in 2014, we tested and it was non-detect. However, we're looking at with a much less sophisticated technology to look for PFAS at parts per billion. Now it's parts per trillion, and we're looking at a much lower level, so we need much more sophisticated technology. Our first test, we have non-detect for our drinking water, non-detect. So that doesn't mean that in 3 other tests that we're going to actually see something different. But knock on wood, our first test has shown, based on the new standards, we have seen non-detect limits of PFAS. We also have seen our testing of our influent in our wastewater treatment and our effluent, so our discharge, below the new standards in our wastewater. So that's something we're going to be talking about at BPW at the next meeting, but it is preliminary. It's our first test. We still have 3 more to go on the water side, but as we are today, we have non-detect based on the new standards for our drinking water.
And just to add to that, that's 29 separate PFAS compounds, and if you're interested in the list, you can go on the EPA's UCMR 5 website, and it tells you exactly what we're testing for until we produce that information. I can add to what Scott said. So our effluent is below the Connecticut DPH drinking water standards. So technically, you can drink the wastewater effluent. I don't recommend that you do that, but that's how low the concentrations are in the effluent at the treatment plants. So yes, we do have 3 more quarters, but what I can share with you, my first job was at the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission. It's now the Water and Sewer Commission, but I started with the City of Springfield. And as we've talked about before, the City of Springfield, their southernmost part of their watershed is the northernmost part of our watershed. Massachusetts has required utilities to test on a quarterly basis for the past 2 or 3 years, and I recently had a conversation with the lab manager that I've known for 30 years. They've yet to detect PFAS in any of their samples in Massachusetts. So they operate the same type of system. It's a reservoir out in Westfield, Massachusetts. It does not get any industrial discharges. It does not get any wastewater discharges. And it's a well-protected watershed. So we are sisters and brothers in watershed protection. And for a couple years, 2.5, I believe, and it may even be 3 years by now, they have yet to detect their PFAS compounds.
So it will be, depending on how this testing goes across the state, and depending on what regulations come out of this, if it holds true that the MDC is zero, non-detect, you will start to see regulations that force other utilities that have an ability to be, like we just talked about the Collinsville plant. The Collinsville plant was built, it doesn't serve MDC, it serves Collinsville. The Collinsville facility was operated by the town of Collinsville, and now purchased by Connecticut Water. So they take 400,000 gallons of water a day. They could take more. They could take up to 1.2 million gallons a day peak, right?
Yeah, a million.
Thank you, million. But they choose not to because they have other well systems within the Avon area that they can backfeed their system. It's cheaper for them to do that than to buy our water. But if this issue comes and it becomes a reality, they may have to buy our water for whatever regulatory mandate that comes out of this.
Any other questions?
Just one,
Oh,
John.
sure.
Which raises another question. If there is PFAS in a lot of the well systems, most of the plastic bottle people take the water out of the ground, which you'll see a rise in concern and interest where PFAS doesn't exist. Because they can't take that out of the water process. It's cheaper than.
Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little off the track, but I absolutely believe with what Scott said in that water companies, Connecticut water companies are sooner than later going to be purchasing water from MDC to dilute their system to hopefully be able to pass all these mandated tests. Because of that, we need to encourage our chairman or our COO to present to the appropriate board to change our bylaws to allow MDC to sell, pick a number, 80% of the cost of whatever water company that water company sells their water for, not what our cost is. You know, we're not a nonprofit, we're not a charity. We need to cover our expenses, and I think that needs to be done sooner than later. So, thank you.
If I may, sure. This is a very important discussion that we're going to have in the water master planning. But the one thing that we have done, and I agree 100% with you, is when MDC sells water under our charter, we sell it at a uniform rate, right? So when we sell water to the town of Portland, we're selling it for the same price we're selling it to everyone. But the town of Portland is getting water. They're not just getting water. And I'm not picking on the town of Portland, but Farmington, same thing. South Windsor. They're getting the water is also serving. Thank you. The water is also serving purposes of fire protection, right? It's also that water is serving two purposes. It's not just drinking water. It's filling the mains along the streets, and it's actually fire protection. So we probably, when we do wholesale agreements, and wholesale agreements are things like Portland, Unionville, Collinsville, New Britain on raw water. These are Connecticut water, right? Unionville and Collinsville is Connecticut water. It was Unionville Water Company and Collinsville Water Company, and then bought out by Connecticut Water. So these wholesale agreements, we should think about when we say a uniform rate, should a uniform rate for a wholesale agreement be the same water rate that everybody else pays? Or should it be the same uniform rate that everybody pays? You know what I mean?
Tie it to what they sell it for.
Right. I mean, and if you look at the agreement with Unionville, they made an agreement with Unionville in 2005 when they took over the agreement for, right? 2005, they took over the agreement from Unionville to Connecticut Water. Their agreement between the two of them said they could only sell the water to Unionville. They couldn't mark it up more than whatever it was, 20%. I don't know what the number was, but so there is a restriction there. But it's not like that. If we sell water to Connecticut Water under emergency in South Windsor or any other location, we're selling it for $3.98, and they're charging $6 and some odd, right? So I agree 100% with you.
Anyone else?
Just to finish up the comment about unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, again, this is the 5th cycle. And when you think of a utility that takes water out of a river or a lake that gets industrial discharges, previously we've tested for hormones. We've tested for many different compounds that you would find that are industrial waste, domestic wastewater, et cetera. So it's a very expansive program. Moving on to the wastewater treatment plants, again, we did some PFAS testing, so we've already talked about that. That wasn't on this slide. But we also develop and submit wastewater reports. So one big difference between the two laboratories is for the drinking water reports, the laboratory function, myself and other staff generate those reports and submit them to DPH. On the wastewater side, we have software that allows the plant superintendents themselves to generate their own reports and send those in. So you'll see the first sub-bullet there, support WPC on all monthly, quarterly, and annual reporting, as well as the sampling that goes along with those. Some of the sampling and additional reporting are acute and chronic toxicity reports. So we actually test if our effluent is toxic to the environment. They literally put little fish and little water fleas in samples, and if they die, we have a toxic effluent. We rarely if ever have a problem with those reports. And also the Hartford Laboratory supports WPC and other departments in generating data reports for the septic grease and sludge that's being received at the Hartford facility. So we can talk about that in a few moments. So with our reorganization, we started off with 2 distinct laboratories. Again, one's in Bloomfield at the Reservoir 6 facility, the other one is in Hartford. It was decided years ago that there would be lab administrators at each position, and that's when I was hired, that's what I was hired for. 2001, I was hired as the lab administrator for WPC. We had an existing lab administrator for water treatment. Upon his retirement in 2020, we went to 1 person running the entire department. And you'll see in the bullet, the second bullet, the second bullet, in 2012, we combined the labs. So we have 1 department since 2012. And the last bullet, you may have seen this with other areas. The district in 3713 agreed to unified laboratory technician job titles, eliminated siloed job titles. We'll see microbiologists and chemists in action a little bit later. Regarding our budget has gone up and down, but it's more so because of regulatory requirements that we must fund the sampling and analysis for. You'll see a peak in 2019, 2018. That was around the last time we did a UCMR. And we took many more samples for many more parameters, not PFAS. Well, we did PFAS in 2013. So you see the budget goes up sorry, wrong button again. So 2018, 2019, the budget goes up. But you've seen the staff decrease. Now we have a total of 8 people. Yes?
Were we doing the COVID issue? Weren't we doing testing on COVID in the public in our sludge?
Well, the MDC staff was not doing it, Mr. Chairman. We were, UConn, I believe, we were taking samples and they would come and pick them up. Yeah. So they could do monitoring of the sewer sheds, if you will, of the different towns and see where COVID rates are increasing.
It was breaking out,
yeah. Yep, exactly. It's a very unique study that UConn was funding, and that was happening all across the country. Determine where COVID was increasing just by wastewater testing. So in both laboratories, we operate a lot of technology. We're very lucky that we have 2 certified laboratories certified by Connecticut DPH so that we can do most, if not all of our analysis on the water side and most of our analysis on the wastewater side. We'll see pictures of the equipment coming up, and for specific reasons we use this equipment. So you can see the list of equipment up there under the first bullet, gas chromatograph and mass spectrometry, GC or GC-MS, for a couple of the different parameters that we run. Atomic absorption, or AA, and inductively coupled plasma, ICP, for metals analysis. Ion chromatograph, or IC, for nutrient analysis. And this is where we might test in the watershed the nutrients that might be increasing. Hopefully they're not. Total organic carbon, or TOC. And again, nutrients, nitrogen analysis on a latchet equipment. One of the most important things that we've developed over the years, is we have a system where manual data entry is minimized. We have analytical equipment that is patched right into our data management systems, and we'll see that in a moment. We have some manually generated data, but that's entered directly into our systems and then interfaced across the district. The first step is our LIMS system, our Laboratory Information Management System. We enter data there, or it's interfaced from instruments, and then that data on a routine basis is sent into another data management system referred to as HOC-WIMS. LabWorks LIMS, we only have the ability to have maybe 6 or 7 licenses, so that's all in the laboratory, and it allows us to do anything that we want to do that a laboratory needs to do. WIMS, on the other hand, HOC-WIMS, is now interfaced with our LIMS system so that on an hourly basis, treatment plant operators don't have to call us up and say, hey, what's the pH of the combined filter effluent, or what's the turbidity? It's automatically uploaded into the WIMS system. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's also a system that's used by just about everybody in the district to a certain extent. And I joke that it's the project that never ends, because as soon as we get one area set up and they're getting our data in on a routine basis and they're using it for reporting purposes, somebody else says, oh, I've got another bunch of ideas. So the last bullet there, the HOC-WIMS system is an operations database. It's not a laboratory database, nor is it SCADA. SCADA records data that we've seen, readings every second, every 5 seconds. How quickly our R&I department can get that data into SCADA, they can get it in there very quickly. WIMS does not have that same capabilities, but it still brings in data on an hourly average, on a daily average, et cetera. So it's used by our water treatment and supply department, water pollution control. In fact, that's where it first started. Our EH&S department, engineering, and even within the laboratory services department, we make sure the data is correct. We enter it once into LIMS, it interfaces automatically into WIMS, and then we review WIMS to make sure there are no electronic errors. We've been using both of these programs for 20 plus years. They're very highly implemented to take full advantage of all the features that are available. And WIMS, again, for drinking water purposes and reporting, that's LIMS. And then for wastewater and other reporting, that is our WIMS system. Another unique feature is that we receive data directly from SCADA instruments. So I'll work with Scott. They'll put a new SCADA system at a treatment plant or in a unit process. We'll get the tags that identify each one of those data points, and we'll bring that into WIMS so that you don't have to go into SCADA to review data. Again, we've received data directly from lab equipment and LIMS, and then there's hundreds of reports developed for all of the treatment facilities. These are some of the lab instruments that we analyze, and I did forget one, and we'll talk about that real quick. In the Hartford laboratory, we have our flow injection analysis for nitrogen analysis. I mentioned ICP, inductively coupled plasma spectrophotometer for metals. Total organic carbon. It's a parameter that we measure to make sure we're removing a lot of the organic material that's in our drinking water. And metals analysis, again, on an atomic absorption spectrophotometer. In addition, we monitor for total trihalomethanes and volatile organic compounds with a GCMS. The THMs are, when you add chlorine, they interact with carbon, the total organic carbon, and produce these compounds that are also regulated by EPA. Next up with that is our gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, GCMS, for taste and odor compounds. There's algae that grows in our reservoirs that can produce compounds as just part of their natural biology that have an earthy and musty odor. And we track that. And we add carbon to the filters at Reservoir 6 to help remove that. But that, again, is another compound that, those are two compounds that we monitor for. Excuse me, the other instrument to the right is a gas chromatograph with an electron capture device. And we measure haloacetic acids with that. So the THMs on the left and the HAAs here on the right are the two disinfection byproducts that we monitor for. And on the right, we have an ion chromatograph, an IC, so that, again, that is something that measures nutrients within the watershed and at the treatment plants. I was going to do a demo of HOC-WIMS, but before I do that, I want to just show you real quick some of the materials that I brought. So the laboratory works with just about every department within the Metropolitan District. We talked about watershed sampling. There's watershed sampling that operators take care of. We analyze those samples, make sure there's no increase in nutrients due to septic leachate, et cetera. Water treatment plant operators and wastewater operators take samples. I didn't bring any of those sample bottles with me, but just to, you could probably assume that we work with water pollution control, water treatment supply. But then we also work with engineering. When engineering installs new mains, they're required to take a sample at the beginning of the run and at the end of the run, and they literally connect this gooseneck. It's a copper gooseneck. It's sterile. And they collect samples that we run for bacteria, and then all the other things that you'd think we would be monitoring for, turbidity, color, chlorine residual, et cetera. And it's a 2-day process. We give them a sample bag that they go out and collect the first day's sample with a gooseneck, and then a second day's sample. So this is engineering when they install new mains and construct the new mains for replacement of new mains or replacement of old mains with new, and any new developments that that are added into our distribution system. I'd also mention that we work with operations. Operations responds when a water main breaks or a water main leaks. But when you put that back into service, you need to test to make sure there's no contamination that got into that water main. So we're like a clearinghouse of, we provide sample bottles, and then analysis. Last is for our lead and copper monitoring. We would literally give a kit to a homeowner. Take a standing sample when the water's not been used for 8 hours, where you get the most lead leaching out because your water's been sitting overnight in your house. We take the first sample, the standing sample, and then a flush sample. We let the water run for 30 seconds and then analyze it again. When we've done this sampling, almost always, we do not detect lead in any of our flushed samples. So that means we might detect lead in some of the standing samples, and EPA will hold us to that. We might have to help out that homeowner, give them advice. But our first bit of advice is always let the water run. Right? You let the water run, the water that's been sitting in your house overnight flushes out, and you're pulling water off the main, and that is almost always not detected for lead, or very, very low concentrations. We also support many different departments by, we standardize lab equipment across the 3 satellite facilities that are also at Hartford. So it helps to promote the transferring of employees and the cross-training of employees. So there are employees at the East Hartford Water Pollution Control Facility that do a lab analysis on a daily basis. And if they get promoted to Rocky Hill or Pequannock, or they just switch to keep the cross-training program going, the same equipment is there. So they never have to relearn anything. So we started that years ago, and we're going to be continuing that into the water treatment and supply. We have chlorine meters that we provide. We provide that equipment out of our budget in the laboratory department. It's a pH meter that we have, so we help support staff for pH. analysis at the treatment plants. And one other thing that we got was recently a field test. It was requested of us that we help the engineering staff get this portable pH meter so they can check samples out in the field. So they don't have to take a sample and bring it back to the laboratory. They can check things as they're going. So many different options, many different ways that we support district departments. The other thing, you'll see the slide that says Hawk Demo. Again, it's a system that we have. If we had time, we'd be able to show it, but I could also talk for 6 or 7 hours on both of these systems. This is where we get the data to our customers. So we take samples, we analyze samples. Nobody has to call us. We don't have to send out emails at the end of the day. It's all interfaced automatically. There's 120 users, so 120 of the 400 plus MDC employees have an account in the system. And then it's available to everybody that needs it, plant superintendents, et cetera. And I just want to share with you some of our lab staff in action. We have 2 lab staff from our Hartford laboratory, Elise Bilodeau on the left, she's a lab technician. Christina Gould is a water pollution control analyst, doing some weighing of filters and some titrating of chemicals. These are our 4 staff at the Bloomfield facility. Julie Gillette is one of our chemists that does the taste and odor analysis on our GCMS. We have Robin Hall, second from the left. She's our microbiologist. She completes coliform analysis and many different microbiological tests. Brian Gregory, another one of our chemists, loading samples onto the inductively coupled plasma, ICP. And lastly, Rick Pinelli is our operator that goes out and does that distribution sampling, 180 samples a month. And there's our staff all together. We have 2 laboratories at a distance apart that I travel back and forth to. We have some cross-training going on. We've got to continue to do that, but we all got together for the picture. And that ends my end of the presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Chairman DeBella.
Yeah, in the North Meadows, the leaching that we have on groundwater and contaminated, do you do testing? Have you been doing any testing? Or is that an outside professional organization that you'd have to use?
The MDC's not done testing specifically, but I believe that's been done by some outside concerns, including DEEP.
That's an issue we should be looking at because we're going to be back in court on that issue, so.
We have done testing.
No, I know we've done it, but we haven't
not
done
with
it
our
lately.
staff.
Okay.
Not with our staff.
Have we done it lately, Scott?
I don't remember the last time we did it. Chris, do you remember the last time we did it?
2001, 21, sorry? 21.
Yeah, 21. But as we just talked about, the results that, there was a study that was done in California regarding wastewater treatment plants, and we had the same results in one specific PFAS compound. For whatever reason, it multiplies, so influent, the sewage coming in, effluent sewer going out. It comes in at a number and it gets multiplied by 5. This California did this whole study and they can't understand why.
That's in the liquid.
But it's not one of the important 4 that EPA is putting restrictions on. We saw the same result on this one compound, but we are actually the influent coming in to the plant from our system is below the drinking water standards at this point. And as it leaves, it's lower, obviously. The drinking water standards, I think, is 10, 12, 16, and 49, somewhere in there for those 4 compounds. It's coming, these are coming in at 7 and leaving at 4.5, 5, roughly.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So between what we heard last week and this week, that's the conclusion of the facilities part of this. So facilities, plays a big job in running the infrastructure of the district from all the acres, water supply, water treatment, the distribution, 100 pump stations, wastewater treatment plants. We run all the pump stations, the vehicle maintenance, the laboratories. So you can see the facilities division has a very significant job. So we tried to give you a little overview, and I understand 4 hours of presentation is not a little overview, but between what we saw on the 8th and tonight, hopefully it gives you a good feel for what the folks I get to work with on a daily basis do. They're true professionals. They do a fantastic job. It's a great environment. We're very proud to work for the district and do what we do every day. So thank you for that. If there's no other questions, I think Patrol is following me.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Chris Levesque, the MDC. I'm going to do the introduction for District Patrol, and then I'll hand it over to Chief Hank Martin. Just real quick, you've probably seen this slide last time Scott did his presentation, but I do want to reiterate, like all the departments you've seen, there's been mass change that's gone on over the last 20 years since the last time this study has occurred. But just to give some indication of where the patrol department was and where it is now, I think back at probably about 2003, we were about 10 staff and gotten to about a peak of about 12 or 13. But what was being done with patrol is there was through this management study, there was a large emphasis on recreation. It was one of our main business lines. And I think through our better understanding of the business, we've blended that core component of what we do for recreation into our business, but didn't make it a focal point where it was a big cost sink for our organization to support. So there was a number of things ongoing at this time, but just highlight a couple of issues that we had. There was 2 pretty significant bicycle accidents on our property that had occurred that became major lawsuits. Part of what was occurring in patrol, this was before Chief Martin's time, with management or recreation, we were spending about $650,000. Now this is 2003 money. $650,000 a year on running our recreation facilities, and Hank's going to get into some of the improvements that we've done there, but that included our patrol staff time as well as our operations staff to manage that. But through the importance of going through understanding our operations, Chief Martin's made huge improvements, relying on Connecticut State Police to help support all of our initiatives. A lot of what patrol was doing at the time was doing what the local police departments and the state police departments should have been doing in our watershed towns. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Hank Martin, and he's going to explain to us how he's actually accomplished all these goals. So, Chief Hank Martin, thanks.
Thank you.
Just to point out, our overall overtime spend over the years, I just wanted to point it out, we were pushing about $250,000 just in patrol back in about 2005, 2006 period. Last year, I think Hank got it down to about $13,000 last year just in overtime for the patrol budget. And that was through a ton of hard work, sitting down, reviewing sort of the day-to-day operations of what we do, where do we need staff, where's our biggest risk, but that's all credit to Hank and managing those costs for us. So that's all right.
Thank you, Chris. Hank Martin, Chief here at MDC Patrol. And a lot of folks don't realize that MDC had a police department since 1929. When I first was hired here in 2006, when I walked into MDC building, a lot of folks didn't know we had police officers. They asked me, was I a state police officer or one of the local departments? In fact, in 1939, during World War II, police officers for MDC were stationed on dams to protect against German attacks. So we've been here quite a while. This is our organizational chart. Myself, rangers, officers, PSOs, and security. We have a mission statement to protect the DC. We serve with honor and duty. Let me be kind of quick because I don't want to go, 2 hours here. Okay, so early on when I arrived here at MDC, we first wanted to establish the fact that we had police powers. So what we did was we knew our powers came under Connecticut Statute 29-19A. We are post-certified, and to be recognized as a police department, we had to choose one of our major towns to go underneath for our powers. So we had 8 major towns that we served. So we used West Hartford, and we received the town code of Victor 760 for our enforcement ability. I passed around a manual here, the books. This is the law enforcement field manual. In that manual, I've marked the pages with a yellow tab. You'll see in there that we are recognized as a law enforcement agency within the state of Connecticut. Those books are dated from 2017 to current, actually 2022. That was hard work by everyone involved in our department to establish ourselves as a department. When I first was hired, Chuck Sheehan said, Hank, you can't mess this up. So, so myself and Scott Jellison were hired around the same time. The both of us combined a lot of resources. I leaned on Scott quite a bit for help and assistance, and together we have accomplished a lot over the years since 2006. Today I'm going to discuss how we went from 2006 until now, 2022, 23. MDC enforcement ordinance, we use our ordinance here at MDC to enforce issues in our recreation areas such as illegal fishing, hunting, biking. These are more of the organizational statutes or ordinance we use. This is a map of the state of Connecticut, obviously, and it shows that anywhere there are reservoirs or conduits that we have police jurisdiction. When I arrived here in 2006, we had no policies, no directives, a few directives, patrol schedule, and overtime. Since then, we have put together 140 policies, procedures, SOPs for lifeguards, public safety, rangers, and so forth. We had very little coordination with other agencies, law enforcement agencies. We only coordinated back then with state police. Now we coordinate with the Connecticut Chiefs of Police, local departments, state, FBI, and others. We believe in teamwork. Each officer and ranger are assigned a specific task. Sergeant Hardy, you can see he's our EMT, medical supplies. He's in charge of PSOs. Ranger Lawler, he has 2 areas there he does. He has a lot. Marine, the deer hunt, field train exercises, our cameras, backgrounds, grants. I'll speak on grants a little bit later. Brad Comer, another ranger, he's our court liaison officer. Fire equipment. Hurley, he does our firearms training. Personnel responsibilities. We provide security, obviously, for headquarters, public safety interns we have. We have a number of those. We used to have 10. We're down to about 5 now. We use those guys for just about everything, reservoirs in Barkhamsted, West Hartford as well. To accomplish this task, we had to get COLLECT and NCIC. COLLECT is a Connecticut online law enforcement communications teleprocessing system. It allows us to run information and is strictly enforced by state of Connecticut and FBI. We use also the NCIC system, which is the National Information Center, which allows us to run plates, persons, warranted vehicle persons, and restraint orders. NextGen, that's the vehicle we use to access the collect and NCIC. The MDTs, those are the terminals in our vehicles that we can look at to view the persons that we're running, and the plates and so forth. Right there is a picture of the body cameras. I passed one around for you guys to look at. Treat that as a hot mic, please. I wasn't able to bring in our mobile device, obviously, but the body cameras there, they're pretty simplistic. When the officer exits the vehicle, he presses the button, it starts to record. It's pretty easy. When he returns back to headquarters, he puts it into a docking station, and the information is then transferred from that docking station into our database. We are mandated through our the new Police Accountability Act to have these things in place. So we've adhered to those directions. In our vehicle, again, here's NextGen. You can see there one of the officers getting a sample of a patrol check. These patrol checks goes into our database. We can then search for any incidents that happen throughout the MDC, missing persons, stolen vehicles, assaults, and so forth. To the right, you see property mapping. We use this grid search here to conduct a thorough grid search of our areas to ensure that if someone's missing or lost or injured, and we bring in other agencies to assist us in a search for this person, we can use electronic grid search, and therefore we don't duplicate efforts. They have access to this system as well. Earlier, Ray spoke about our camera system. We do utilize our camera system a lot because, again, we had to cut the budget quite a bit. Guys have retired. We have few officers, so we rely on technology a lot. So with the technology involved, we can actually look at sites before we arrive. Go on the cameras. It's excellent for officer safety. We can look ahead, see what's going on prior to our arrival. We can then ask for assistance from another officer or another agency at that point by using the first one on the left is a desk monitor, which I use to see what's going on with the district. And the second picture there is one of the MDTs in the vehicle. Camera and site security projects. We received a grant, a federal grant, which allowed us to purchase cameras for the district, fencing, lighting, and to hardening our facilities. As you can see, one of the photos down to the right, there's a trench there to lay conduit for those cameras. And the one to the left there, that was actually photos taken from Stephen Hayes. You guys don't remember that name, Stephen Hayes. He was involved in the Cheshire murders. He actually committed a crime here at MDC prior to committing that crime in Cheshire when he assaulted a family. Challenges and opportunities. We hope to enhance our camera system throughout, over the next couple of years. We are getting better and better with our cameras. They work really well, like I stated earlier. We look to promote ideas and technology to improve our services. In order to patrol our areas, we use marked vehicles, police all-terrain vehicles, mountain bikes, foot patrol. We use the different types of methods to patrol because we believe that if we can create a sense of omnipresence, a crime is likely to not occur. We can deter crime. We also work in joint operations, as Chris stated a moment ago, with other agencies, local agencies, state police, DEEP, MASS, and troopers. Use our cameras also to support our dams. Rather than driving all the way up there, it's like a 40-minute ride to get to Park Hempstead. We can turn our cameras on, see what's going on before we get there. If there's an incident, we can start to investigate, early on by calling in state police to assist us there. Our officers do mandatory patrol checks at each facility. This right here, what you're looking at, is our water pumps, stations, above ground water tanks, hatch locations, vaults, and other single points of failure. Our delivery system, we complete reports on a daily basis of when incidents occur and report those to other agencies so that if anything were to, they gather information for us. So when something happens, they'll have information that's relevant to the threat process at water facilities. We have what you call an incident command system, the ICS. There are 7 critical factors that I expect officers to do when there's an incident. So the first one is to establish communication and control, which is huge because when we arrive on the scene, other agencies are going to follow behind us. We want to make sure that we set up a good scene and also give them a lot of area to work with. So we identify the threat zone, we identify the inner, outer perimeter, establish a command post, a station area for our senior management, as well as other emergency personnel who may be arriving. And we may also request additional information resources. With the grants that we obtain, we harden our facilities with gates. This right here is the access to one of our facilities here. When I first arrived to MDC in 2006, the upper left corner there is the police substation, and the bottom left is the current police substation. In the middle there and to the right is our boathouse. Chris Levesque did an excellent job as a young engineer, assisted us in upgrading our substation and our boathouse years ago. Business continuity, we work with headquarters, obviously, senior management. We work with IT to procure, to obtain the computers, body cameras, our collect system. Work with HR for hearings and terminations. We work with customer service for complaints and threats. Work with finance, hydro plant, our engineers, of course. After we obtain these grants, we work with an engineer to implement the resources that we purchase. Work with Ray and others in our recreational areas to implement signs to provide safety for folks who recreate in the area. A lot of folks think that, we're just seasonal, we only work in the summertime. No, we work all 4 seasons. Here you see the winter, we're enforcing hunting laws, poaching, ice fishing, snowmobile, trespassing, and also MDC ordinance. We also conduct, more importantly, the security assessments. Security assessments are important because it allows us to go to each facility and do a vulnerability assessment to determine if they need more lighting, fencing, cameras, etc. Spring, we actually busy there as well. We have illegal dumping, ATV, off-road. We enforce illegal fishing, camping. Believe it or not, a lot of folks decide to camp out at MDC property. They want to go in and set up camp and actually reside at our reservoirs. So we get reports from civilians as well as our officers, our rangers, and then we go over and kind of move them along. Summer we also are quite busy at summertime, recreation areas, illegal swimming, boating, fishing, mountain bike, marijuana cultivation. Every year we find huge amounts of marijuana in the district out in our forest land. So much that we have to put it inside of a dump truck. We call in state police. They seize the evidence, bring it to a burning facility. So this has happened almost every other year. So everybody's smiling on that one.
Hank called me one year and said, Scott, we found about an acre and a half of marijuana in the woods. And I said, don't touch it. Call the state cops. The state cop says, we don't want to touch it. I said to Hank, we're not touching it, we're not touching it.
Okay, in the fall, we're busy with our deer hunt program, hunting, fishing, of course. Illegal dumping occurs all year round. There's solid substances, there's liquid substances that are being dumped throughout the district, so we're constantly busy. Andy spoke on this a little earlier. Our natural resources, the deer hunt program we have, we actually do the backgrounds for that. The Deep actually runs the program. We assist them by doing backgrounds and sitting in on the deer hunt meetings. At one point, we put fences around areas to determine the effect of the deer on the soil and the samplings. So in the picture there, you see where there's green vegetation, there's a fence there, which shows that it's protected from the deer. Outside of that area shows that the deer has ate away at the vegetation, therefore creating an issue with soil erosion. This is a National Guard Civil Support Team. We like to work with those guys at times because they have all kind of fancy equipment. They are initiated by the governor. If there's a chemical in our area, in our district, in the water system that is foreign, we can call the Civil Support Team. They can examine the substance on site. Rather than running down to New Haven or another site to get a sample, which takes hours, we can get it done in like minutes when we call on the Civil Guard Civil Support Team. Years ago, we implemented the ride-along program. We started with our command center because we thought it was a good thing that they know exactly what we do in the district, and how vast the area is that we have to cover. So there's 31,000 acres, of course. So when calls come in, we're being dispatched, and folks are like expecting us to get there in like 5 minutes. So we did a ride-along program and allowed the employees at our command center to ride with us, so they can see how vast this area is and the response time that's needed. We have since opened it up to all employees, so anyone wanting to ride along with us for a day or half a day, a couple hours, you're welcome to do so. Our PSO program, earlier I spoke about that and being a tentacle for us because I'm very proud of that program. We have PSOs every year. You'll see on the left-hand side there, they're doing handcuffing techniques. On the right-hand side, we have all 10 of the PSOs for that particular year. Underneath that, you'll see photos on the wall. Those are kids that have graduated or moved on from our program. It's over 27 kids there. They're now local officers, state police officers, both here in Connecticut and Massachusetts. They're correction officers, FBI, and even a lawyer. So the program has been pretty successful, and I'm very proud of it. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Chief, excellent report. You mentioned in your use of technology and your cameras and video. Do you also utilize the use of drones?
No, not at the moment. We are looking at it.
Okay. And also, one of your beginning pages, it showed the graph of your overtime going from $250,000 down to basically zero. And I think it listed your staff at 2006 of 10 employees. Can you tell us what your staffing level is today?
We've got to shift a little bit. We used to have 10 officers and no rangers. Now we have 2 officers left, and we have about 3 or 4 rangers. We chose to do that because of the savings and liability issues and so forth. It works well for us.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So we changed philosophy, like most, we created a new job description called the Ranger, which does not require you to be a post-certified officer and you don't carry a gun. And so we have realized that the majority of our activity is really a watershed protection responsibility, and having Hank and a few officers, licensed post officers, makes the most sense. I'm going to tell a little secret. Hank called me. I was probably here a month and a half. I started here in September of 2006, and Hank started
Same time.
roughly the same time. And Hank called me and said, Scott, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, well, all of our officers are working at the fair. What fair?
Riverton.
Riverton Fair.
Yeah.
So the person who used to be in charge of the police department, which wasn't Hank and had retired, was using our staff with our uniforms to work at the fair. And the only reason why we found out about it was because the state police said, hey, this is not your gig, this is our gig. So
Jurisdictional issue.
the things that we're doing with patrol, just like with all these other departments, is the reason why most people didn't realize we had a police department was because they never came down to Hartford. They were always in the watershed, and they were always doing whatever they did rather than actually focusing on what's really important, like our security within the MDC buildings and all those things that go with it. So Hank's done a great job, just like everyone, doing more with less, but much more sophisticated than we ever were.
I forgot how good Scott memory is. That was like 17 years ago. Yeah, that was pretty bad. You know, it was brought to my attention that the former, person in charge had a whole detail in the town of Riverton at a festival, a summer festival, a fall festival, and they were getting paid to do their private job by that entity rather than MDC, and they were in uniform, MDC uniform, wearing patches and so forth. When I first came in, it was really challenging because they were on different pages. They weren't in the same uniforms. Some weren't wearing uniforms. It was pretty ragtag. They had no equipment in the facility. There was just a couple chairs and a desk. There was no computers. It was rough sledding. And when Scott came on board, and he and I teamed up to bring the department to the standards of a police department, a real police department, we did it pretty quickly and soundly, and I thank you for your support. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief. I don't see any. We were going to circle around to the minutes, but we've lost most of our committee. So let's go to opportunity for opportunity for general public comment. I know we lost Judy, so.
Can you imagine?
Anybody online? Okay, with that, I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great job.
Thank you.
That's just one story.